The American dream was never just a slogan. It was a contract, a specific, calculable economic agreement that underpinned the social fabric of the West for nearly a century. The terms were simple, almost mechanical. If you input 40 hours of labor per week, stayed out of legal trouble, and demonstrated a modicum of competency, the system would output a middle-class existence. This output included a detached single-family home, a reliable vehicle, a nuclear family supported often by a single income, and a retirement that didn't involve greeting customers at a discount department store until age 80. For the baby boomer generation, this contract was largely honored. The system worked. The input matched the output. But for Generation Z, looking at that same contract in 2025 is like staring at a map of a city that was burned to the ground 3 decades ago. The roads are gone, the landmarks are rubble, but the elders are still giving directions based on where the post office used to be. To understand why Gen Z is quiet quitting the economy, we must first discard the lazy, reductive narrative that characterizes this generation as fragile or allergic to hard work. This isn't a crisis of character. It is a crisis of mathematics. The quiet quitting phenomenon is not a mass psychological event of laziness. It is a rational market response to a broken incentive structure. In economics, when the price of a good becomes too high for its perceived value, demand drops. In the labor market of the 2020s, the good is the American dream. The price is total dedication to corporate hustle culture, and Gen Z has correctly calculated that the price is inflated and the product is defective. Let's look at the brutal arithmetic that defines the daily existence of a 20-something in the modern economy. In 1980, the median price of a home in the United States was roughly $47,000. The median household income was about $21,000. A house cost roughly two times the annual income. A young person could essentially stumble into homeownership with a few years of disciplined saving. Fast forward to the mid-2020s. The median home price has skyrocketed past $430,000, while the median income for individuals in their early 20s hovers precariously around $35,000 to $40,000. In major metropolitan hubs where the actual jobs are located, the ratio of home price to income isn't 2 to, it is often 10, 12, or even 15. The finish line hasn't just been moved. It has been placed on a different continent. When a goal becomes mathematically impossible, human beings do not double their efforts. They abandon the goal. This is the psychological pivot point where hustle culture dies. Why grind 80 hours a week to impress a boss and secure a promotion if the resulting salary bump still leaves you renting a 400 square foot studio apartment with a roommate until you are 40? The carrot that kept the donkey moving, the promise of ownership, stability, and equity, has rotted. All that remains is the stick, the threat of homelessness and starvation. And while the stick is effective at ensuring basic compliance, showing up, doing the bare minimum to not get fired, it is terrible at extracting innovation, passion, and loyalty. This is the symptom phase of the collapse. We see it in the viral TikToks of exhausted Zoomers crying in their cars on lunch breaks, not because they are weak, but because they have realized the terrifying truth: they are running on a treadmill that powers nothing. They are witnessing the financialization of their entire existence. Education, once viewed as the golden ticket to upward mobility, has mutated into a predatory debt trap. A 4-year degree, which was a differentiator in the 1990s, is now the bare minimum entry fee for an entry-level administrative job that pays less than what a unionized factory worker made in 1974, adjusted for inflation. Gen Z enters the workforce with a mortgage-sized debt hanging around their necks before they have even earned their first paycheck. They start the game with negative points. The cynicism is compounded by the visual evidence of wealth concentration. Through the lens of social media, Gen Z has a front-row seat to the wildest excesses of late-stage capitalism. They watch as corporate profits hit record highs quarter after quarter, while their own real wages, what their money can actually buy, stagnate or plummet. They see the greedflation phenomenon, where corporations used post-pandemic supply chain excuses to permanently hike prices on eggs, milk, and rent, extracting record margins while claiming poverty. This transparency is new. Previous generations might have suspected the game was rigged. Gen Z has the receipts in 4K resolution. Consequently, the social contract has shattered. The employer-employee relationship has devolved into a transactional Cold War. Employers demand the loyalty of the 1950s, "we are a family here," while offering the gig economy instability of the 2020s. Gen Z's response is acting their way. It is a precise calibration of effort to compensation. If the pay is minimum, the effort is minimum. If the loyalty is non-existent, the notice period is non-existent. This is often framed by older commentators as entitlement, but from a purely economic standpoint, it is efficiency. Why would a rational actor provide excess labor for free? If you ordered a burger and the restaurant asked you to come back into the kitchen and wash dishes for an hour without pay, you would refuse. Yet corporate culture expects salaried employees to answer emails at 9 p.m. work weekends and absorb the workload of laid-off colleagues without additional compensation. Gen Z has simply started saying no. This no manifests as the soft life, lazy girl jobs, or Tang Ping lying flat in China. It is a global rejection of the hyperproductive imperative. It creates a terrifying feedback loop for the economy. The current system relies on the assumption of infinite growth, driven by an ever-striving workforce desperate to consume. But if the workforce decides that the consumption isn't worth the striving, the engine of consumer capitalism begins to sputter. We are seeing a generation effectively opt out of the material rat race because the buy-in fee is too high. The symptoms are everywhere: the decline in marriage rates, the plummeting birth rates, the refusal to take on management roles. These aren't just lifestyle choices, they are economic protests. Gen Z is conducting a general strike. They are witnessing a society that prioritizes the protection of asset prices over the livability of the future for the young. This prioritization is not accidental. It is the result of 50 years of deliberate policy engineering designed to insulate incumbents at the expense of new entrants. To understand the mechanism of this machine, we have to look away from the social media symptoms and stare directly into the engine room of the economy. If you look at a chart of American economic data, specifically the relationship between productivity and compensation, you will see two lines traveling together in harmony from 1948 until roughly 1971. But in 1971, something broke. The lines diverged. Productivity continued to skyrocket thanks to computers, the internet, and automation, but wages flattened out. The wealth generated by that increased efficiency didn't go to the workers. It went to capital. It went to shareholders, executives, and asset owners. This divergence is the ground zero of the current crisis. It marks the transition from an economy built on production to an economy built on financialization. The boomer generation entered the workforce during the tail end of the production era and rode the wave of asset inflation into retirement. They voted for policies that solidified this shift, embracing the neoliberal doctrine that prioritizing shareholder value would miraculously trickle down to everyone else. It didn't. Instead, it stripped the copper wiring out of the American infrastructure to sell for scrap, leaving the next generation with a hollowed-out shell. The most egregious example of this intergenerational warfare is the housing market. We often hear that the housing crisis is a supply and demand issue, which is true, but it omits the why. The supply shortage is artificial. It has been manufactured by local zoning laws, championed by older homeowners who attend city council meetings to block new developments. This phenomenon, known as NIMBYism, not in my backyard, is essentially a cartel behavior. Existing homeowners realized that if they restricted the supply of new homes, the value of their existing homes would skyrocket. They turned their shelter into a speculative investment vehicle. By banning multifamily units, high-rises, and affordable starter homes in desirable areas, they effectively pulled up the ladder behind them. They secured their net worth by making it illegal for Gen Z to live near good jobs at an affordable price. This creates a feudal dynamic where the young are forced to pay exorbitant rents to the old, effectively transferring their labor income directly into the passive income accounts of the landlord class. Gen Z is not just priced out of buying. They are being bled dry just to exist. And the system rewards this hoarding. Tax codes incentivize real estate speculation with write-offs and capital gains loopholes, while labor, the only thing Gen Z has to sell, is taxed at the highest rates. The system tells you it is better to own things than to do things. But if you are born into a world where everything is already owned, you have no move to make. Then there is the higher education complex, a predatory system that would be illegal if it were run by a payday lender. In the late 20th century, the government decided to guarantee student loans, ostensibly to help poor kids go to college. But basic economics dictates that if you subsidize demand without controlling costs, prices will rise. Universities, seeing a bottomless pit of guaranteed government money, began hiking tuition at rates that vastly outpaced inflation. They sold the millennial and Gen Z cohorts a lie that a degree was a guarantee of a middle class life. In reality, the degree became a new form of indentured servitude. The credential inflation meant that jobs which previously required a high school diploma now demanded a bachelor's, yet the pay remained the same. We created a system where a 22-year-old starts their adult life with a $50,000 negative net worth, carrying an interest rate that often makes the principal impossible to pay off. The government acts as the enforcer for this debt, making it one of the only types of debt that cannot be discharged in bankruptcy. If a boomer bankrupts a casino, they can walk away. If a Gen Z student gets cancer and can't work, their student loans follow them to the grave. Underpinning all of this is the role of the central bank and the policy of quantitative easing. Since the 2008 financial crash and accelerated during the pandemic, the Federal Reserve has printed trillions of dollars to stabilize the economy. But this new money does not enter the economy evenly. It enters through the banking sector and financial markets. It inflates the price of assets, stocks, bonds, and real estate first. This is known as the Cantillon effect. Those who own assets, older generations, see their net worth balloon as the stock market hits record highs. Those who do not own assets, younger generations, only experience the downside, inflation. The cost of bread, gas, and rent goes up because the currency is devalued. But because Gen Z doesn't own the S&P 500, they don't get the offsetting benefit of asset appreciation. They are running a race where the currency they are paid in is melting in their pockets, while the finish line, wealth accumulation, is moving away from them at the speed of the printing press. The silent robbery of inflation is the mechanism by which the debts of the past are paid for by the purchasing power of the future. The massive national debt, accrued to pay for entitlements and bailouts that mostly benefit the elderly and the corporate elite, will ultimately be serviced by the taxes and inflation borne by the young. Furthermore, corporate consolidation has destroyed the bargaining power of labor. In decades past, if a local employer underpaid you, you could walk down the street to a competitor. Today, in many industries, 3 or 4 megacorporations own everything. They effectively set the wage floor. The system is a closed loop. It is a game of monopoly that has been running for 40 years, where one group has hotels on Boardwalk and Park Place, and the other group has just rolled the dice for the first time. Gen Z's quiet quitting is the realization that the only winning move in a rigged game is to stop playing by the house rules. So they are flipping the board. Or more accurately, they are walking away to play a different game entirely. This brings us to the future, which does not look like a return to the golden age of the 1990s, nor does it look like a total societal collapse. Instead, we are entering an era of the Great Bifurcation, a splitting of the economy into two distinct realities. On one side, you have the legacy system, the corporate ladder, the 30-year mortgage, the credentialed elitism, and the desperate cling to status symbols. On the other side, you have the emerging Gen Z adaptation, a decentralized, nomadic, and hyperpragmatic approach to survival that prioritizes time over money and autonomy over prestige. The solution for this generation is not coming from the ballot box. While political engagement is necessary, the demographic math is currently a wall. The United States is a gerontocracy. Older voters turn out at nearly double the rate of younger ones, and they hold the vast majority of the wealth. Waiting for a legislative rescue package is a strategy based on hope, not data. Gen Z has intuitively grasped this. Their quiet quitting is not a political protest in the traditional sense. It is a stoic withdrawal of energy from a system that ignores them. It is the realization that if the macroeconomy cannot be fixed, the microeconomy must be fortified. This fortification starts with the radical redefinition of success. For 70 years, success was physical: the big house, the new car, the corner office. For Gen Z, success is becoming temporal: the ability to control one's own time. We are witnessing the death of the ambition that fueled the 20th century. A Gen Z coder or creative might turn down a high-stress $100,000 job for a low-stress $60,000 job that allows them to work remotely and live in a cheaper locale. This is not laziness. It is an arbitrage strategy. They are maximizing their happiness per hour rather than their dollars per year. They are decoupling their identity from their labor, a psychological firewall necessary to survive in a world where employment is precarious. Economically, we will see the rise of the portfolio life. The single career trajectory is dead. In its place, Gen Z is building a mesh of income streams. A mix of gig work, content creation, freelance contracts, and perhaps a part-time lazy girl job for health insurance. This fragmentation is messy and lacks the stability of the boomer era, but it offers antifragility. If you lose your one corporate job, you are destitute. If you lose one of 5 income streams, you are merely annoyed. This is the economic version of guerrilla warfare. However, there is a darker forecast approaching. The great wealth transfer is often touted as the salvation. This is a statistical mirage. That wealth will not be distributed evenly. Much of it will be consumed by end-of-life care, swallowed by the healthcare industry and luxury retirement communities. What remains will go to select few, exacerbating inequality within Gen Z itself. We will see a sharp divide between the heirs and the hustlers. The heirs will be able to buy homes and participate in the legacy economy. The hustlers will be permanently locked out of asset ownership, forcing them into a lifelong subscription model of existence, renting their homes, leasing their cars, and subscribing to their entertainment. Yet there is one card Gen Z holds that creates a glimmer of genuine power: the labor shortage. The laws of supply and demand are absolute. As the boomer generation retires en masse, they leave a massive vacuum in the workforce. There simply aren't enough young people to replace them. For the first time in decades, labor will become a scarce resource. In the coming decade, corporations will be forced to bid up the price of labor not out of benevolence, but out of desperation. The quiet quitting of today is the precursor to the collective bargaining power of tomorrow. When no one is willing to work for poverty wages cease to exist. Ultimately, the American dream is being rewritten from a contract of acquisition to a contract of adaptation. The white picket fence is being replaced by the digital passport. The goal is no longer to keep up with the Joneses, but to escape the system that created the Joneses in the first place. Gen Z is adopting a philosophy of post-materialism by necessity. They are finding community in digital spaces, finding meaning in niche hobbies, and finding stability in relationships rather than real estate. The economy of 2030 will be defined by this friction. The friction between a dying system that demands endless growth and a rising generation that refuses to fuel it. It will be a turbulent transition. There will be no grand announcement that the old world has ended, just a slow, grinding realization that the rules have changed. For the individual watching this, the move is clear. Stop waiting for the prices to go back to 2019 levels. They won't. Stop waiting for a politician to save you. They can't. The only way out is to reduce your dependence on the system, lower your burn rate, build skills that are independent of a single employer. And find peace in the fact that you are not failing. The game was simply never designed for you to win. You are the glitch in the matrix, and your refusal to comply is the only thing that might eventually force the system to reboot.